Ahora vamos a hablar sobre los verbos que terminan con AR. Now we're going to talk about the present tense of AR verbs. And this is very exciting for me because this is our first explanation of verb conjugation. Conjugation simply means change. And we don't realize it, but we do it in English just the same. But we're not taught necessarily that it's called conjugation because we just grow up hearing it and learning it. But conjugation means taking that base form of the verb and changing it to match whoever the subject is. Now remember, the subject is the person or the thing in the sentence doing the verb. But verb conjugation is very important. We do it in English. For example, our verb to be. To be, like to be a professor, to be a student, to be tall, to be short, etc. To be must change depending on the subject, right? It's not correct to say, I be, you be, he be. That's not right. We change the verb be to match our subject. That's called verb conjugation. I am, you are, he is, etc. These are all forms of the same verb, to be, but they're just different depending on the subject. Now, this is very tricky because there's not a particular rule to understand exactly how to conjugate the verb be. It doesn't even begin to look like the verb be. So the beauty of most of the verbs in Spanish is that they follow a very particular pattern of conjugation. You simply have to understand that there are particular endings that go with these subject pronouns, and then verb conjugation will be very easy. So, now we're going to talk about AR verbs. Now remember, in Spanish, verbs in their infinitive form or their base form mean to do something. And they're going to end in three possible endings. The infinitives of verbs end in either AR, ER, or IR. We're going to discuss AR verbs today. So remember, in their infinitive form, they mean to do whatever that action is. To speak, to eat, to live. It doesn't make sense to add the pronoun to the infinitive. I cannot say, yo hablar, because what that says is I to speak. It doesn't make sense. I need to change or conjugate hablar to match my subject pronoun of yo. So let's review. Vamos a repasar los pronombres. Yo, tú, él, ella, and usted. They all come together because they all share one form of the verb, but they mean he, she, and you in a formal way. Now the plural third person also shares a form of the verb, ellos, ellas, and ustedes. And our last subject pronoun is nosotros or nosotras, depending on if it's a group of ladies or gentlemen. So, the part that's going to require the most work about understanding verb conjugation is simply memorizing the endings that go with these different subject pronouns. The yo ending is o. Repitan, o. Now, the tu ending, as. The ending for each of these forms, él, ella, and usted, is a. Ellos, ellas, and ustedes, an. And nosotros or nosotras is amos. So this is called the present tense ending of AR verbs. AR verbs conjugated to match these subjects. It's a simple three-step process. The first thing you need to do is identify the subject of the sentence. You will know that because it's either going to be one of these subject pronouns or the name of a person or a thing that will fall into one of those categories. For example, if I'm talking about mi mamá, my mother, which one of those categories is she going to fall into? She was your clue. She would fall into this category of él, ella, and usted. If I am talking about mis padres, my parents, which category are they going to fall into? They, ellos. So remember, the first step, el primer paso, is to identify your subject. Is it a subject pronoun from this list, or is it a person or a thing that will fall into one of those pronoun categories? Number 2, drop the AR from your AR verb, and that will leave you with the root of the verb or the stem of the verb. So if the verb is hablar, for example, por ejemplo, hablar means to speak. If the verb is hablar and I drop the AR, that's what I'm left with. This is my stem. The third step is add the new ending. And the new ending is simply the AR ending that matches that subject that you've identified. So if I want to tell you I speak in the present tense conjugation, because hablar means to talk or to speak, my subject becomes yo, because I'm identifying myself as the speaker, the subject. Yo. Then I drop the AR and I'm left with my stem, ab, which lacks an ending. So I need to add the new ending. So using yo, all I do is come over to the chart and pick the ending that corresponds, which is O. So I simply add O to my root or my stem, and I get this sentence. Hablo. Hablo means I speak. Now, you can use the subject pronoun as well. Yo hablo, which means I speak. But it's not necessary, because once you see this verb conjugated, the O tells us I'm the one speaking, and we don't need to be redundant. So it's not grammatically incorrect to say yo hablo. That's okay, but it's not necessary because it's implied by the form of the verb, yo hablo. So we can take this 3-step process and apply it to all of the different subjects. Let's do, por ejemplo, to. Put it in parentheses because the to is not required in the sentence. To is my subject. Take hablar and drop the AR, and we're left with habla. And add the new ending, as, and we have hablas. Tú hablas. That means you speak. Muy bien. So, tenemos una lista de vocabulario. We have a vocabulary list en la página 40. Also, this explanation of AR verb conjugation se encuentra en la página 39. 39 is where you find the explanation of verb conjugation. Now, the vocab list of AR verbs se encuentra en la página 40. It's on page 40. These vocabulary words are kind of fun because a lot of them are action words. So I'm going to be silly and do actions and just hope that those of you out there will do them with me, because I read somewhere once that it's a lot easier to get vocabulary into your head if you can associate it with something other than the word. So the action is supposed to help you memorize the word. So, en la página 40, we see the first word as bailar. So we can do a little disco dance. This is bailar. If you do this with me, it will help you memorize the word. Repita, bailar. Okay, now, buscar means to look for. So let's buscar together. Buscar, to look for. Ahora, cantar is to sing. Muy bien. Cantar. And now we're going to comprar. Let's just pretend like we're buying something. We give the money and we take the thing. That's comprar, to buy. So, vamos a repasar. We have bailar, buscar, cantar, and comprar. Ahora, desear, to desire or to want something, desear. And the American Sign Language version of that is like wanting something. So we say desear, desear. Ahora, enseñar. That's what I'm doing right now, so I'll just pretend like I'm writing on the board. Enseñar is to teach. Escuchar is to listen to. Cup your ear. Escuchar. And estudiar. Get your book out. Read very fiercely. Estudiar. Hablar is to speak, so we just speak. Hablar. Necesitar is similar to want. I need something. Necesitar, to need. It looks like necessity. Pagar, money, to pay for. Pagar. Ahora, practicar. This means to practice. Practicar. We practicar deportes. We practice sports. Regresar means to return. So, to go back. Regresar. Regresar. Tocar is to play. So let's play our guitarra. Tocar. And ahora, tomar. Tomar can mean either to take or to drink, depending on the context. Tomar. And lastly, trabajar. Trabajar is to work. I think it's similar to practice. Let's pretend like this means work too. Trabajar. Okay, so para repasar, to review, repita por favor these vocabulary words. Bailar, buscar, cantar, comprar, desear, enseñar, escuchar, estudiar, hablar, necesitar, pagar, practicar, regresar, to go back, tocar, tomar, and trabajar. Muy bien. Now, all of those verbs are AR verbs in their infinitive form. You can see that they all end in AR, and they all happen to be regular verbs, which means they follow those simple rules for conjugation. So we can take any one of those verbs and conjugate or change it to match these subjects. So let's take trabajar, bailar, escuchar, comprar, and cantar, and conjugate them to match the subject preceding them. See if you can do that in your head for a minute. Trabajar. First step is identify your subject, which is yo. Drop the ending, which is AR. And then the third step will be to add the appropriate ending or the new ending that's the present tense form of the AR verb. So here's our root or our stem. The first sentence is trabajo. I work. Trabajo. You can expand on the sentence too. You could say, por ejemplo, trabajo en la universidad. I work at the university. Now our stem, bailas. Add the new ending. Bailas means you or tú. Bailas means you dance. Bailas. Él, ella, and usted all share the same form. It would be escucha. Escucha. So, in this particular case, it may be more important than in others to use that pronoun because escucha could mean he listens, she listens, or you listen in the usted form. So if you haven't set up a context by explaining before this sentence who we're talking about, then it might be better to say él escucha, or ella escucha, or usted escucha. And that's the same with this next one. Comprar becomes ellos, ellas, or ustedes compran. That means they buy or y'all buy. Compran. Nosotros, cantar becomes cantamos. We sing. And again, you can expand on these sentences. We can say, ellos compran el libro para la clase. They buy the book for the class. Nosotros cantamos, well, mal. We sing badly. Él escucha la música, listens to music, etc. So, AR verbs, that's the infinitive form of the verb that ends in AR, conjugate in 3 steps. The first one is identify your subject, which is going to be either one of the subject pronouns that we've learned or another person who will fall into one of those categories. The second step is to drop the AR, which will leave you with your stem or your root, and then add the new corresponding ending. This is the most difficult part of understanding this lesson. It's simply memorizing those endings. So if you just spend some time practicing, trabajo, bailas, escucha, it might help to say it with the pronoun as well for practice sake. Yo trabajo, tú bailas, él escucha, ella escucha, usted escucha, ellos compran, ellas compran, and ustedes compran, nosotros cantamos. So 3 steps. First, identify the subject. Second, drop the ending. And third, add the new ending. And that's conjugation of AR verbs. Okay, si ustedes miran, if you all will look at la página 39 in your libro de texto, you'll see that the book has an explanation of the present tense of AR verbs as well. It explains an infinitive in A, sección A, and then B offers the steps of conjugation. Sección C gives a chart with the endings. That's where you'll memorize those endings. It's a yellow box in la página 40. Sección D es la lista de los verbos nuevos. It's the list of the new verbs. And sección A makes an important point to note that in Spanish, when 2 verbs are used together, the first one is often conjugated to match the subject, and the second one is left alone. It's not conjugated. It's left in its infinitive form. And here's why. For example, using 2 of our new verbs, I could say, yo necesito comprar el libro. What I'm saying is, I need to buy the book. And if you'll remember, the definition of the infinitive means to do whatever that verb is. Now, the first one is conjugated because it's I need, not I to need. It's conjugated to match the subject, I need. The second one is left alone, to buy. Yo necesito comprar el libro. Y también en la página 41, also on page 41, sección F talks about the significance or the meaning of the verb in the present tense. And in Spanish, the present tense verb is used much more often than we would say it in English. For example, hablo. Hablo means I speak, but it can also mean I am speaking, depending on the context of the sentence. So if you see a word, por ejemplo, like ahora, now, or right now, ahorita, change that to right now. that will tell you that it's something happening right now at the moment. Hablo can mean I speak or I am speaking. You can also talk about something that you're going to do tomorrow by simply adding the word tomorrow to the sentence. Hablo mañana means I will speak tomorrow. So this one form of the verb carries a lot of significance depending on the context of the rest of the sentence. We have to remember that it doesn't simply mean I speak in that very boxed-in form. Depending on the rest of the sentence, it can have several other present tense or future tense meanings as well. Okay, one other important note. En la página 41, a note about negation. Negation means to make this negative. Right now, all of these sentences are affirmative, or they're saying, yes, this happens. Trabajo means I do work. That's another meaning. I do work. Bailas, you dance. Escucha, él escucha means he listens. So we have to know how to negate that as well, or make it negative. I don't work at the university would simply be no trabajo en la universidad. It's as simple as adding the word no before the conjugated verb. That's important. The placement is important. This is the conjugated verb, the verb with the new ending from that list. So the no goes before that conjugated verb. So even if you have a subject pronoun, for example, let's use a different word. La cena is dinner. So let's say, yo deseo pagar la cena. That means I desire or want, and remember that's conjugated to match the yo, the pronoun. Pagar, we left alone. It's in the infinitive. To pay for dinner, la cena. Yo deseo pagar la cena. I would like to pay for dinner. Now, if I want to negate that statement, then I have to insert the no before the conjugated verb. It can't go here, and it can't go here. It needs to go before the conjugated verb. Yo no deseo pagar la cena. That's how we negate the sentence.